Welcome to the panel on mobility and the energy transition. We have a no PowerPoint zone here this morning. So thought that would please some of you at least. I'm going to introduce the panelists first, just so you know who these people are, and then we'll launch into the conversation. So I'm Mary Nichols, the chair of the California Air Resources Board. If you were here earlier, you've already heard my bio read, so I'm not going to tell you anything more than that. I'd like to introduce Pierre Moreau, who is serving in the government of the province of Quebec. Before he was elected for the first time in 2003, he worked as a lawyer specializing in the field of municipal law for over 20 years. As well as being an elected member of Quebec's National Assembly for more than 10 years, Minister Moreau has held numerous offices, including Chief Government Whip, Minister responsible for Intergovernmental Affairs, Minister of Transport, Minister of Municipal Affairs, Acting Minister of Public Security, Minister of Education, Minister of Finance, and President of the Treasury Board. He has been a very busy man. On October the 11th of 2017, he became the 30th Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, the post that he holds
Sounds like
today.
a eulogy.
Quebec, of course, is fortunate in that it can rely on a mix of green, diversified, and abundant energy resources, and this guarantees a terrific quality of life for the citizens of the province and creates business opportunities for Quebecers around the world. It also enables the government to pursue a strong commitment to combating climate change and set ambitious objectives moving towards a greener economy. For Minister Moreau, the way forward is clear. We need to change our ways of doing things, and innovation and solidarity are the key. Of course, as I'm sure most people here already know, we, the state of California and the province of Quebec, are joined together as partners in the Western Climate Initiative. We trade allowances back and forth, but other than that, we don't really have anything to do with each other, right? we keep it. No, we are very closely aligned with Quebec in many ways, and it's been a terrific partnership. Next, I want to introduce my friend David Hochschild, who was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown in February 2013 to the California Energy Commission. He fills the environmental position on the 5-member board, where 4 of the 5 members by law are required to have professional training in specific areas, including engineering or physical science, environmental protection, economics, and law. So he's the environmental guy on the commission. Commissioner Hochschild's career has spanned public service, environmental advocacy, and the private sector. He first got involved in the solar field in 2001 in San Francisco as a special assistant to Mayor Willie Brown, where he launched a citywide $100 million initiative to put solar panels on public buildings. He went on to co-found the Vote Solar Initiative, a 60,000-member advocacy organization promoting solar policies at the local, state, and federal level. He served as executive director of a national consortium of leading solar manufacturers and worked for 5 years at Solaria, a solar company in Silicon Valley. In 2007 and 2008, he served as a commissioner at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. For his work to advance clean energy, Commissioner Hochschild was awarded the Sierra Club's Trailblazer Award, the American Lung Association's Clean Air Hero Award, and the Department of Energy's Million Solar Roof True Champion Award. Commissioner Hochschild holds a BA degree from Swarthmore College and a Master's of Public Policy degree from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and he was a Coro Foundation in Public Affairs, Coro Fellow, in Public Affairs. Okay, next in line, we have Danny Kennedy, who leads the California Clean Energy Fund, connecting entrepreneurs everywhere to capital to build an abundant clean energy economy that benefits all. He is also the president of CalCharge, a public-private partnership with the National Laboratories and Universities of California, unions and companies working to advance energy storage. Kennedy co-founded Sungevity, the company that created Remote Solar Design and Powerhouse, solar's premier incubator and accelerator. He was the original backer of Mosaic, the $1 billion solar loan provider, and remains on the board of PowerHive, a solar mini-utility in Kenya, and Sunergize, a solar-as-a-service business out of Fiji, and the Energy Lab Australia. He is also director of nonprofits Vote Solar and Power for All. Kennedy authored the book Rooftop Revolution, How Solar Power Can Save Our Economy and Our Planet from Dirty Energy, in 2012. Prior to starting Sungevity, he worked at Greenpeace and other groups on climate and energy issues for 20 years. He had an amazing background. Last on the panel here is Laura Renger, Principal Manager for Air and Climate at Southern California Edison. Laura is in the Regulatory Affairs Organization at Southern California Edison, and she's in charge of air and climate. In this position, she leads a team that's responsible for the utilities' regulatory and legislative policy concerning air quality, climate change, and transportation electrification. As the regulatory lead for transportation, Laura routinely speaks to a wide variety of audiences, including conferences like this, and she testifies in front of the Public Utilities Commission and serves on as the lead for transportation electrification proposals, including the one that was just filed at the CPUC on January 20th of 2017. Prior to this position, Laura was a senior attorney in the Southern California Edison's Law Department, primarily focusing on air and climate safety and transmission. She's the immediate past chair of the environmental section of the Los Angeles County Bar Association and the current treasurer of Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles. She also serves as a secretary of CalSTART, an organization dedicated to the growth of the clean transportation industry, and as treasurer of the California Electric Transportation Coalition, a nonprofit association dedicated to promoting economic growth, clean air, fuel diversity, and energy independence. And she has her bachelor's from Occidental and a law degree from Columbia Law School. Okay, that's enough about who these people are. Now let's talk about what we're here to talk about, which is mobility and the energy transition. Countries around the world and global auto manufacturers are announcing bold plans to end production of gas and diesel vehicles in the coming years. Emboldened by new funding sources, California leaders continue to push to achieve ambitious zero-emission vehicle targets, and we're working to increase renewable energy sources for those vehicles. Declining battery prices and greater public awareness all are on the horizon. But are we on the pathway to electrifying everything as electric vehicles become part of the home energy system? Is there a tipping point that's about to occur for the existing grid infrastructure? California has been a leader for many years on clean and electric transportation, and 2018 will be no different. Just last week, Governor Brown announced a new target to get to 5 million zero-emission vehicles by 2030. He's issued an executive order to accelerate infrastructure development and a $2.5 billion investment plan to bring 200 hydrogen stations, 250,000 public charging stations, and more fast chargers than gas stations to California by 2025. Big goals. Also this year, we'll be amending our low-carbon fuel standard and our cap-and-trade programs, both of which are implemented by the Air Resources Board, to achieve greater emissions reductions through 2030. And we're going to be looking at a zero-emission bus mandate that would require all new buses to be electric or fuel cell by 2030. And we'll be talking about concepts for the next round of light-duty vehicle standards as well that would come into effect after the 2025 model year. So we have tools in place to make the transition to electric and zero-emission transportation fast and beneficial. Commitment to incentives, infrastructure development, and an outreach campaign through Veloce, which you'll be hearing more about, I believe, later today. So if we put them all together, we could make transportation the market-winning option from now on. But it's not quite that simple, is it? I'm excited about our panel today, which is full of visionaries who are actively working in key positions to put this vision into practice. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to them. So let me start with Minister Moreau and ask you the question about what you're doing besides cap and trade that affects clean transportation. And could you just give us a little rundown of your most recent efforts and how they're going?
Yes, thank you very much, Mary. I'm very pleased on behalf of Quebec government to be here. We're the only French-speaking government in all North America, so let me say bonjour à tous, et j'espère que vous allez suivre cette conférence avec beaucoup d'intérêt. So, I know that it's better for me to speak English, though. The government of Quebec tabled recently a very ambitious energy policy in Quebec, which is called Energy Policy 2030. And within that policy, the policy has 5 main targets. First, and that's the one we will be discussing this morning, reduce our use of oil product by 40%. Second, to stop using thermal coal entirely starting now. Increase our bioenergy by 50% and our renewable energy by 25%. And just as you mentioned, Mary, you know that we are very rich in renewable energy, which is hydroelectricity that we have a lot in Quebec, and we are currently selling. We just had a deal with Massachusetts recently to sell electricity over the next 20 years. And we want to become 50% more energy efficient. So, in order to reduce our use of oil product by 40%, our first target is to reduce its use in the transportation sector. Because the transportation sector in Quebec burn up 75% of all oil product used for energy in the province and is responsible for 41% of our greenhouse gas emission, which is tremendous. So the government of Quebec is strongly investing in transport electrification, and the action plan I just mentioned aims to make Quebec a world leader in use of electricity-powered transportation and driving force in sustainable transport. So our goal includes bringing the number of rechargeable electric and hybrid vehicles in the province up to 100,000 by 2020. I know that the figure is much cheaper than the one you have here in California, but I just want to remind you that the population of Quebec is 8 million people, and you have your 40 million here. Quebec is already the province that sells the most electric and rechargeable vehicle. So we put our first network of public charging station, we launched it in March 2012. And by December 31st, 2017, the province had over 1,800 electric charging stations, out of which 100 were 400-volt electric charging station, which enable a consumer to recharge its vehicle within a 20-minute time. And I was in Norway a week ago. You know that Norway is the world leader of electric car, and I was wondering, I was asking my counterpart, the Minister of Energy there, how they achieved such an important number of electric car in circulation in Norway. And he says, well, you know, even though people are recharging their electric car at home, they don't feel secure if they cannot rely on a very large electric network of recharging station. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to increase the number of electric stations in the network. So We are working with what we call circuit électrique, electric circuit, which is being coordinated by Hydro-Québec, which is the government-owned corporation responsible for hydroelectricity in the province. And we would like to double the number of stations by 2020, bringing them to around 3,000 or more. And we also have Tesla Motors that has its own charging station in the province, which would add up to the current government-owned network. So we're really pushing for Quebec vehicles owner to go green as part of our fight against climate change. In that same topic, we recently adopted the ZEV standard for zero-emission vehicle, a powerful incentive for increasing the number of clean model on offer in Quebec. A lot of people in Quebec are ready to purchase zero-emission vehicle, but the options are limited. So that is why Quebec has become the first Canadian province and one of the first North American states to set a standard that will help Quebec consumer gain access to a vast selection of rechargeable electric and hybrid vehicles. The idea is that the law provides that cars manufacturer has to accumulate carbon credit according to the number of clean vehicles sold in Quebec. And if they don't get a certain number of carbon credit, they will have to acquire them on the cap and trade market. So it's another major step forward in fight against climate change. We also have, and I think that you have it here in California as well as in Japan, a pilot project with Toyota Canada. Toyota Canada will provide 50 hydrogen car called the Mirai, which my Japanese is not as good as my French, but I've been told that Mirai means future, which is great. You know, and Toyota will provide 50 car to the government. And we are currently working with one of Quebec's university on hydrogen to see if it would be possible to produce hydrogen with hydroelectricity. You know, that hydroelectricity is renewable green energy. And if we can use hydroelectricity to produce hydrogen, which is a clean energy, we would therefore reduce the cost of hydrogen, making it a competitive option to fossil fuel. So we're working very hard on this, and we have a pilot project that would establish 2 refueling stations, one in Montreal, one in Quebec, which are more than 250 kilometers apart, and we have been told that the Mirai has a range of about 400 kilometers. So the pilot project will make us know whether or not it's a viable other option for electric cars. And it seems that you can refuel, quote unquote, an hydrogen car within 5 minutes, which is a gain and efficiency for the consumer. So TEC, which is Quebec Electric Transition, which is a government-owned body, is developing the project pilot with Toyota, and Toyota is now a partner of Quebec. And finally, yesterday, it was a great day here in Los Angeles because we were at the Los Angeles International Airport to assist to the first trans-Pacific flight of one of Qantas Airline Boeing 787 Dreamliner, powered by biofuel that was produced with the technology developed by Agrisoma, a Quebec-based company. And I think that they will be on a panel here a little further this morning. And this biofuel is produced with carinata, which is a mustard seed that grow in very harsh soil and during winter time where nothing else is growing. And you have to crush the seed to produce an oil that, once refined, produce biofuel. And the biofuel produced with carinata reduced by 50% the emission of greenhouse gas. And I was discussing, and I think that Stephen Fabianski, which is the one who developed that technology, will be one of our panelists today. And I spoke with Stephen and I asked, well, do you think that this invention could be used in the trucking industry, because in Quebec, 99% of the trucking industry use diesel. And if we can switch it to Caritana, or to biofuel produced with Caritana, it would be a great improvement as far as greenhouse gas emission are concerned. So we believe that in Quebec, time has come to connect consumer and renewable energy and give the transport industry, no matter if it's truck, buses, or plane, widespread access to bioenergy. So Quebec strongly believes the solution to our energy challenges are in the hands of those who are willing to innovate. The future of green economy requires vision and daring, and we need to work with companies specializing in clean technology and support them so they thrive. And we need to encourage natural partnership like the one between Agrisoma and Qantas Airline, because they help us develop new ideas for greener energy. So basically, that's the main topic.
That's a great opening. Thank you so much. David, bringing it back to California, your office recently put out a report describing some of the benefits of reaching 5 million zero-emission vehicles in California by 2030. Can you share your perspective on the benefits of electric transportation and why you're devoting your spare time to being the chair of the board of Veloz?
Sure. Well, thank you, Marion. First, for the folks standing in back, there's plenty of seats up front if you'd like to join us. Let me just say this transition to a clean transportation future is a transition we have to make. And we have to remember, first and foremost, this is about the health of our kids. This is about the health of our kids. And don't get sidetracked with the sexy new Tesla model and all the buzz about that. At the end of the day, this is a health issue. And California is a giant incubator for clean energy technologies. We did it. The modern wind industry was really born in California and spread globally. The modern solar industry, born in California and spread globally. And we're winning on that, by the way. The majority of new energy generation capacity added domestically and globally last year came from renewables. So we have an incredible muscle here to bring technologies like clean transportation mainstream. This is something where everyone has a role to play. I'd like, in particular, if I could ask Admiral Yancey Lindsay to stand up, and I see former Admiral Dennis McGinn. If you can stand up. Let me tell you what these guys did. You too, Dennis, please. Let me tell you what these guys did. So last year, the single largest procurement of electric vehicles in the United States by a federal agency happened by the Navy right here in San Diego, and it took leadership to do that. You guys are shining away. I just wanted to thank you for. So look, last week the governor came out with a bold new goal to get to 5 million zero-emission vehicles by 2030. And my prediction is we're not just going to hit that goal, we're going to surpass it. But it's going to take work at every level. We need the cash incentives. We need the leadership, such as Yancey and Lindsay and so many other mayors and other CEOs around the state have shown. And we also need a big, bold kind of got milk campaign for electric vehicles. It's time. And so that was the basis for the formation of this new nonprofit called Veloz, which is going to be rolling out a big public outreach and communications campaign similar to what we did for the Flex Your Power campaign during the energy crisis, for the drought during the water, during the drought for water, and it's time to do that for clean transportation. And by doing that, we'll get to volume. You look at how do costs come down. It's not complicated. It's three things. It's innovation, it's automation, and it's scale, and it's mostly scale, right? And so really, this is a sort of valley of death we're in right now, where there's all these models of zero-emission vehicles being made, but they're being made in small volumes. So manufacturers today are stapling between $3,000 to $6,000 on every clean vehicle that goes out the door of the factory because it's in small volume. And we need to get that to big volumes. And we've done this again and again. California, we're very lucky to be here. You know, the iPhone, right? Raise your hand in the audience if you own an iPhone. Okay, so look around. That's like 80% of the people Android. Here. So Android here, right? Exactly. The iPhone was invented 10 years ago, right? Last year, Apple manufactured their 1 billionth iPhone. When we get things to scale and they can go ubiquitous, we have to have an expansive sense of possibility as we approach this challenge. It's doable. We have to focus on it. And right now we're lucky, very lucky, to have Mary Nichols in the role that she's at, chairing the Air Resources Board, because she's been focused on this for quite some time. And it begins with policy, but doesn't end there. And having that long-term, stable policy is a critical piece. So we're excited to partner with all of you, and we look forward, particularly at Veloz, to engaging with many more stakeholders as we roll out this campaign. Josh, if we could ask you to stand for a minute. This is our new executive director of Veloz, Josh Boone, who's leading this effort. Thank you. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to have some questions for everybody later, so let's just do the opening round, at least, of questions from me. I think I'm going to jump over, Danny, to Laura next, because her company put out a very bold and comprehensive document, an electrification pathway for California that would see 7 million, so more than the governor's goal, EVs on our roads in 2030, along with vast new amounts of renewable energy and increasing electrification of buildings. This obviously was a vision that was designed to rally and focus people on the potential for electrification, and it got a pretty powerful response from everybody except the gas company, I would say. So can you describe your company's vision for the future of clean transportation in California?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary, and thank you for having us today on this panel. I'm honored to be here with these distinguished speakers. As Mary noted when she went over my bio, I am a lawyer, so in light of that, and to make sure we are 100% compliant, I would need to give you this disclaimer. The remarks that I'm going to make today may touch upon a proceeding that is currently active before the Public Utilities Commission. I have scanned the audience, and I do not see anyone who is a decision maker for the Public Utilities Commission. However, if you are, please take note, and please come find me afterwards. Okay. Thank you. So now back to the fun stuff. Yes, we have developed this clean energy pathway. There are plenty of copies for everyone outside. And part of our pathway is that we are calling for 7 million electric vehicles on our roads by 2030. The pathway was developed to come up with a comprehensive, holistic plan for achieving our 2030 goals. The way that we developed this, it's the most cost-effective plan for Californians. As Mary noted, it calls for 80% carbon-free renewable energy by 2030, as well as 1/3 of our buildings to be electrified. And part of the pathway is to, I think, speak to not just the policy, which is obviously important, but as Commissioner said, the hearts and minds as well. We need to connect. We need to have our customers understand that why we're doing this is for our health. It's for all of us. And that when we electrify our transportation sector, everybody benefits. These aren't just cars for rich people. These aren't just investments for those who, like to have the newest iPhone or toys, but these are benefits that we all should achieve. And so we too are really excited about the Veloz campaign because we think it's an important component to really getting to the heart of why are we doing this. Another really important component of our vision for 2030 is to help become partners with the state in electrifying and to do what the utilities can do to move the ball forward. And in our applications that we have currently pending before the Public Utilities Commission, and a few weeks ago we had 5 of our what we call the priority review projects approved, which are really exciting. We're making meaningful investments in the infrastructure to help support this transition to a zero-emission future. And it's really important to have the utilities play this role because we have the market scale to bring about this kind of change. We have the relationships with the customers, and quite frankly, the need is so great. I mean, I think at this point, it's really an all hands on deck. We're all needed. We need the EVSE providers to come to step to the table. We need the state to continue with all of the wonderful funding and infrastructure and financing and incentives that we're doing, we need the market education and outreach. We all need to collaboratively come together. And I think the important thing too with our pathway is to remember that if we do come together, we can find the solution that's best for all Californians, for the ratepayers, for the taxpayers, for the customers. We'll all benefit from the clean energy future.
Thank you. And I'm going to now turn to Danny Kennedy, who is in charge of the California Clean Energy Fund. Can I get a loan? Do I come to you for a grant? Where do I get the money? And what's your perspective, really? What are you guys doing in terms of mobility and energy in California?
The answer to that question is that we sort of help startups start up. So Mary, if you want to start up a company, come talk to me.
Okay.
We've got up to $600,000 care of the California Energy Commission to provide to good ideas. We're finding and funding the next 100 companies to help achieve the state's energy and climate goals. Did about 28 of those investments last year, plan to do 25 this year. Just a little ad break, if you don't mind. Over at Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, which is one of our partner organizations here in LA, couple of miles away, there's a showcase today of lots of startups from around the world, actually, including some of our seedlings, one of whom announced today follow-on funding from Boeing Ventures, which is nice to see, in the battery space. And also, we have a new solicitation coming out February 15th for the next batch of companies we'll invest in this year. So if people are in LA and have a startup or even have the inkling of a startup, go to Lacey on Thursday at 2 p.m. to learn about that. We can fund napkin sketches, you know, kind of. Very early stage ideas. So we do that, and you know, as to what we're seeing in the marketplace, I've got to say it's a really exciting time. I mean, it's hilarious to have the governor on the one hand saying 5 million EVs and Southern California Edison saying, no, 7 million, you know, like upping the ante. And you know, meanwhile, the entrepreneurs of California are going, oh, God, how do we do 1,500, you know? And the charging infrastructure and the businesses that will be required to balance the grid when you have that many distributed energy resources to manage and all the rest of it. So it's a very exciting time. We're seeing fantastic companies. Just a couple of glimpses of it for you. There's a lot of hot stuff in the battery component space. Don't want to get too geeky, but you know, new separator technologies, new anode technologies, sucking carbon out of the sky to make graphene for the components within batteries. All these being funded by CalSeed right now. Not being funded by CalSeed, I'm seeing cool companies here in LA like Change with a J, which is actually doing delivery vehicles with a big Chinese backer doing the batteries, but sort of changing the way your Amazon Prime will be delivered to you. Before the drones get there, there'll be delivery trucks still, and they'll be electric and probably autonomous. Another really interesting sector which is really being led here in Southern California is electric aviation. You know, fantastic that Qantas is doing biofuel-based jet flights across the Pacific. But there's a really good case for electric aviation, particularly on short-haul flights. So there's a cool company here in LA called Ampere, which is retrofitting Cessnas with electric engines, and doing well with it, and could be in the sky in 2 years' time with an electric engine, or two, in fact. They can fit 2 engines where a Cessna has 1 motor. So you've got redundancy and backup, which makes it a lot better. But you know, better, faster, cheaper. One last thing I'll note is just all of this is dependent on batteries. You know, that's the missing piece for the grid. That's the missing piece for the electric vehicle electrification. The convergence of mobility and electricity is in the battery technologies. And California really is a leading light in battery IP. We don't make that many here. We make some. And we think that that's a huge opportunity for California to grasp, as the opportunity to manufacture here as well as to invent.
Thank you. I have some questions which are really meant for discussion by the panel, so I'm going to throw them out and hope that they'll be picked up by everybody, or at least as many people as want to answer them. If nobody answers, I'm going to have to call on you. So let's hope that doesn't happen. We talk a lot about incentives to get people over the initial hurdle of purchasing electric or other zero-emission vehicles. I've been constantly reprimanded, and I will try to do my best when I say zero-emission vehicles, I mean both battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, because they are electric vehicles also, and we are believers in both of them. So we've looked and we've funded in California over the years incentives for purchases, and we're going to continue to do that if the legislature supports the governor's plan. But I have to say that operating costs don't get quite as much attention, and particularly in the heavy-duty sector and among fleets, operating costs may be a more important factor than the initial purchase price of the vehicle. So I'm going to ask the panelists to comment if they agree with that, or if you don't, you can say that too. But if that's true, how are we going to better integrate vehicles into our grid to really make that value clearer, unlock it, if you will, and ensure that clean vehicles can outcompete dirty vehicles? So, David, you look like you're ready to jump in.
Yeah, so one key point to keep in mind, there's an elegant nexus between renewable energy and our renewable energy goals and the penetration of electric vehicles into the grid. It really helps us integrate variable renewables to have a lot more EVs on the grid. When you get to 5 million electric vehicles in the state, that's about an 8% increase in state load, and we can make use of all this surplus renewable generation. We're having to turn off solar and wind projects every single day in the state of California at some time. And so EVs actually help smooth out and make the grid operate better and more reliably and help us get to those high renewable energy goals to begin with. I think the rate design, we're not there yet. And as an example, I bought my first electric car last year, the Chevy Bolt, and I looked at the electric vehicle. I live in PG&E territory. I looked at the electric vehicle rate, and actually was not as attractive as the rate I'm currently on. So I stayed on the current. And I think we have to have the benefits that electric vehicles deliver, both for clean air and for renewable integration, reflected in electric rate design, because when we do that, that's going to help accelerate the adoption. I would point to the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, which I think has done the boldest and most innovative thing on rate design, which is you basically get 2 years of free electricity for your electric car when you buy an EV in SMUD territory. Now, that is really important because all the data shows once customers start driving an electric car, they're an electric car driver for life, or a fuel cell driver for life. So these things matter. Getting them hooked is key early, and in the rate design, I think we have a big opportunity to make some improvements there.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we in Quebec have a close eye on hydrogen vehicles because we have very harsh weather in Canada, and the coldest it is, the weakest the battery.
I was going to ask you about that.
And then we have a problem. And with the pilot project we have with Toyota, Toyota will provide not only the vehicle but the 3 years will provide for 3 years the hydrogen needed. So our research is looking into having the possibility to produce hydrogen at a very low cost with hydroelectricity, and if we succeed in that, it will eliminate the gap between the not so clean car and an electric car that is powered by hydrogen. So I think it's a very promising avenue that we are looking at. And in a few weeks from now, I'll be up north in Quebec, in Quactac, where Hydro-Quebec, with the research department of Hydro-Quebec, is now making research on how could we enhance the capacity of battery under very cold weather. In Quactac, I've been told that at this time of the year it's minus 45 or something like that. So we have the cold weather and the laboratory to go ahead with this. And the idea is that we have 14 villages in the up north Quebec which are very isolated, and they're not part of the electric grid. So they rely on fossil fuel, mainly diesel, to produce electricity. And we want to bring them either by solar panel or by windmills energy producing, or with those battery. And if solar panels are reliable in such a cold condition, we have to have the capacity to accumulate the energy. And therefore, we are committed to research in order to enhance the capacity of battery under very cold situations. So if we succeed in that, it would be a benefit for the electric, standard electric cars. And if we succeed in producing hydrogen with hydroelectricity, it will be a good idea for a hydrogen car
But
as well.
it sounds like it's also part of a rural economic development program if you're bringing the new
Absolutely.
energy to those small
Absolutely,
towns.
and it's job creating as well.
Yeah.
So we're very pleased with the idea.
Exactly. Any additional? Yes?
I just wanted to quickly agree with Commissioner Hochschild on the rate design issue. You know, I think when we look at the total cost of ownership for buses, especially, they're cost competitive. There's a lot lower maintenance costs, a lot lower operations costs. The rate design is what a lot of transit agencies perceive as the barrier to adoption. And when we were trying to figure out how could the utility really make the biggest impact in helping to transform this market, one of the things that was brought to us by our customers was that when you have one bus or you have two buses coming online, you pay such high demand charges because your usage costs are not that high, and so it doesn't balance out. And so we took a really close look at this, maybe 2 or 3 different rounds of going back to our regulatory ops teams and saying, okay, let's try it again. And we came up with a rate design proposal that waives demand charges for the first 5 years of the program. And then from years 6 through 10, those demand charges are slowly fanned back in. And that will allow our fleet customers to adopt buses, you know, in a small number at first, but then grow their fleet so that at the end of the 10-year period, when you have large amounts of usage, the demand costs aren't as much of an issue because it's a calculus. And we put a lot of work into this, and it did fit within traditional rate-making principles. So it still meets the traditional PUC test to ensure that it's fair for all the ratepayers. So that's one of the proposals that is currently pending. We're hopeful that it will be approved by the Public Utilities Commission this year because we're hopeful that it can incentivize that kind of adoption.
Interesting. Thank you.
That's great. Can I
Yes,
just,
go ahead.
Sorry,
please.
just quick,
No,
two quick
please.
observations.
Actually,
just
this is
that,
great because I'm going to move to the audience to give them a couple minutes to
You know,
ask questions as soon as we're done.
when you get the rules and the rates and the regs right, then you've got to have an entrepreneur come in and solve for that. You know, like these rate settings for a charging system for a fleet would require demand response. We've got a great little company out of UCLA called Moev, M-O-E-V, that's doing exactly that in the seed portfolio. But just back to your first question, Mary, the other piece that we need is financial innovation here. Mm-hmm. You know, how do you play off of that? You know, you asked about debt. These EVs are, you know, whether it's buses or delivery vehicles or service vehicles, they're high capex, low opex actually. That's a financial engineer's playground. And we need to attract those entrepreneurs as much as the technicians that are going to make the charging discharging cycles right to match the right rate structure and stop the curtailment of the renewables.
Well, it seems like we're finally at the point in California where we've got enough of the vehicles out there on the roads as well as in the showrooms that it should attract that level of interest. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, we've got 5 minutes and time to call on a few people. Your hand was up first, so go ahead.
Commissioner Hochschild made a point about how, I guess, the curtailment of renewables seems to be happening and that EVs are helping to sort of combat that at some point. My only question there, I guess to make it a bit problematic, does that then mean that the state is in the business of supplying energy to like private EV owners then? So sort of like gas stations we have now, so that the state is then somehow becoming a, you know, part of the private enterprise of what should be future electrical charging stations.
So in case, I think I get the question. I'm just going to repeat it or try to do it real quickly because maybe not everybody could hear. We didn't have a microphone to hand around. So the question, I guess, is for you, David, but others might want to comment. Is your idea that the state is going to sort of take over the responsibility for being the fuel provider for these electric vehicles and thereby create a whole new model of state ownership?
Decentralization and yeah, I wanted to offer a solution. I wasn't making it right.
No, I'm sorry if I mischaracterized your comment.
No, well, so broadly speaking, we're already in that business. I mean, our job as regulators is to make sure that we have reliability for every electric load in the state, including people charging from electric vehicles. This doesn't change that model. The power would still be delivered through the utility or through the CCA or through the municipal utility, however it works out. One point I would make, though, that is a benefit we don't realize. Electric vehicles over time reduce rates for other customers, and it's not intuitive. When we promote energy efficiency, when we promote rooftop solar, those are things that reduce demand, and most of the costs in our system are actually fixed costs, so you're spreading those costs actually over fewer kilowatt hours when you do efficiency, when you do solar. When you're doing electric vehicles, actually, you're spreading those same fixed costs over many more customers and many more kilowatt hours, and actually EVs, for the most part, fit around our existing architecture, so it's actually not a whole lot of cost to add all these EVs, and so there is a benefit over time of actually reducing rates for everyone.
Okay.
So very much in the weeds, Laura, your notion about changing the rate structure for fleets, buses, and so forth, eliminating demand charges. Precisely the opposite is happening in the PUC districts and the investor-owned utilities by shifting the demand, increasing demand charges, and shifting time of use charges so that it disincentivizes rooftop solar. Is it intended to do that and to have what we're talking about here be utility scale solar, or is it how can we address that? It has made uneconomic practically everything.
With regard specifically to what we were calling for in the white paper, we did look at this from a holistic approach to try to see what was the most economical for the customers. And that is a mix of utility and distributed generation. With regard to the downward pressure on rates, I think that is something that is really important to remember when we're looking at electric vehicle adoption, because it does lower the system average rate for everyone, which is why the adding those additional EVs on the grid can benefit all the customers. And so we have to ensure that we're not making the fuel that we want our customers to switch to so prohibitively expensive that it's not attractive.
Just to add to that, it will lower rates the most when we are intelligent about how we time the charging. And by the way, with longer range vehicles like the Bolt and the new Model 3 coming out that have over 200 range vehicles, you can actually be more flexible about when you charge. And what we want is a statewide EV happy hour, right? Where they're all plugging in right when we have this surplus generation. I mean, that's the vision.
I love it. That's a great name. We are out of time, and this room is going to go to somebody else. So I want to thank our panelists for a great conversation.